Hello, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending from where in the world you are joining us. My name is Carla Brown. I'm a Kumi volunteer who'll be hosting this session. I'm based in Winnipeg, Canada, located on Treaty 1 territory. Thank you for joining us for the latest Kumi Now online gathering as we learn about the effects of the Israeli apartheid wall. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that this session is being broadcast live on Facebook. So if you do not wish to appear, please turn off your video feed. We would also love it if you could quickly share one of the links that are being shared currently in the chat so that others may join us. We are now inviting people from the audience to tell us how you are applying Kumi Now in your community or are otherwise advocating for Palestine. If you have an idea or a project that you'd like to share for up to 5 minutes in a future meeting, please email us at kumi@kuminow.com. Now it's time for our weekly activism survey. Mark, could you launch the poll, please? Please note that there are 3 questions, so make sure you scroll down to read the third one. So thank you for putting your answers in the poll there. The answer to number 1 is, of course, whatever you have chosen. The answer to number 2 is the second option. The completed wall will be more than 700 kilometers long and up to 8 meters, which is 24 feet high. The answer to number 3 is the first option, the seam zone. The seam zone is the area between the Green Line, the official border of the West Bank, and where the Israeli apartheid wall is actually built. The United Nations estimates that if the Israeli wall is entirely completed along its planned route, about a third of West Bank Palestinians will be affected. That's 247,000 Palestinians located in the seam zone, and about 400,000 will be separated from their fields, jobs, schools, and hospitals. So we hope you find this session today interesting and informative. We'll start by having everyone that you'll see today introduce themselves. So we'll start with Omar, and then we'll go to Chris, and then we'll go to Elias.
Thank you, Carla. My name is Omar Harami. I am part of the Sabil family. I will be sharing with you a news update from Palestine and Israel today. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chris Rose. I'm the director of Amos Trust. Amos is a small creative human rights organization based in the UK. We've been campaigning for full equal rights for Palestinians for, I guess, about 35 years, something like that. And I've visited on numerous occasions. We've done many, many different trips to Palestine, from walking to cycling to eating. We call it a culinary tour, but it's just eating, really. And a little bit of cooking in there. And then lots of visits. I remember my first visit to Sabil and being very struck by Naeem there. And in 2017, we walked from London to Jerusalem, which was one of the more, one of the more strange things we did, which was to apologize for the Balfour Declaration. But we did a whole load of different actions and support a whole range of campaigns.
Yeah, hello, my name is Elias Ta'is, and I'm the executive director of Holy Land Trust, which is a local NGO that was founded in 1998 in Bethlehem, working on it's a human rights organization trying to create a future vision for peace. We have been working with Amos, our main partner in the UK, for several human rights projects and advocacy. The latest is the home rebuilding that we have been doing in the last 10 years, maybe. So I'm happy to be here and share with you about the reality here on the ground.
Thank you for sharing. Omar, can you please give us the update from the ground now?
Thank you, Carla. So we try not to duplicate the same news that we send out. If you haven't joined the Sabil Wave of Prayer, please do. We send out an email today just reflecting on what has happened and offering prayer requests from Palestine and Israel to the new developments in the country. So today, the news that I will be sharing has not been covered, or mostly have not been covered in the wave of prayer. Unfortunately, COVID cases continue to rise in both Israel and Palestine. The numbers have reached over 1,000 in Israel alone. Although many people are, the Ben Gurion airport is open with certain restrictions on travel, there are rumors now that they might close the airport again at the beginning of August. Not confirmed yet, but it's creating great uncertainty, which does not encourage people to travel either in or out of the country. All over the news, Ben and Jerry's, the famous ice cream, has decided to stop selling their ice cream at Israeli settlements, illegal settlements. So there is a big campaign inside Israel for the people who support settlements against Ben and Jerry's, and there is also another campaign that is happening all over social media, people encouraging the courageous step of the company to stop selling their products in Israeli settlements. So there's a great achievement for a very famous ice cream to make a stand for justice and peace in Palestine and Israel. Today is the first day of the Muslim Eid, and unfortunately the past 2 days there is a lot of there are many problems and tensions around Al-Aqsa Mosque. 2 days ago, over 1,500 settlers, Israeli settlers, came into toured into Al-Aqsa Mosque, some taking part with prayers, some just touring the whole Al-Aqsa Mosque. In May, friction started when around Al-Aqsa Mosque for similar incursions by settler organizations and activists. So we're very worried. We do not want to go back into a very cycle of violence. So everybody is watching with and being hopeful that there is no escalation will follow. This picture is taken today from it's Midhat Isawi. He is the father. His daughter was born after he was in jail. Today she's 8 years old, and today is the day that he was released from prison. There are around 300 Palestinian prisoners who are in jail, who have their children. Their children were born during their time in prison. They haven't seen their children. So there is a campaign over social media and around Palestine to try to focus and place pressure in order to advocate for the rights of Palestinian political prisoners to be freed. As of today, 160 Palestinian homes or structures have been destroyed under the new Israeli government. So many people were very much asking us, what do you expect with the new government, with the new coalition? It seems the occupation is practicing and continuing as normal, unfortunately. So this is a reminder today, the 160 mark of homes and structures being demolished. Yesterday, there was a group of diplomats, international diplomats, who were in the Jordan Valley trying to speak and to show solidarity with Palestinian families who have their homes under demolition threat. And they were forced to evict and to leave the place by the Israeli army. This is the first time that the Israeli army attacks or forces a group of diplomats out of an area. So this is unprecedented. It seems that everybody is losing patience. Everybody is misbehaving inside Israel within all of the human rights violations of the Palestinian Authority. So the country is very tense, and people are very much worried that it seems that we are at the verge of another bloodshed, unfortunately. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Omar. We'll now turn to our main issue of the week and to our special guests. As Chris and Elias speak, if you think of a question, please type it in the chat box. And after their presentation, we'll try to ask as many of them as possible. Chris and Elias, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, Carla. It's great to be here with Sabeel this week. I'm on Kumi now. I caught a bit of last week's, and it's going to be slightly different from Charlotte's presentation last week. I was told you know all about the wall, and many of you have seen it, so I'm not going to give you loads of facts about it. Carla's mentioned some of them already, and has talked about the amount of dispossession it creates. What we're really going to do is to talk a little bit more about the invisibility of the wall, particularly, and the fact that in so many respects, this incredibly visible construction has become invisible. It's become invisible in much of the research. If you do a Google search of research about the wall and about its impacts, you'll find very little which has been published in the last 10 years. If you start to look at it from a campaign side, you find things from years ago, but very little which is relevant today. And it's a lot about, we're going to be talking a bit about why is that the case? And what is it about the wall, which actually, as we approach to next year, which is the 20th anniversary of the start of the building of the wall, why we need to start to bring this up in our advocacy work, why we need to do integrated campaigning about it, and particularly in the run-up to 2004. The simple reality about walls, and this came from a piece of work by a German photographer who went around the world photographing walls, is that walls give the impression that a problem is insolvable. So they're not a solution to a problem. They're often portrayed in that way. So the separation wall was portrayed as being a solution to the wave of suicide attacks, which were happening in the Second Intifada. And it was a solution to keep Israel safe. They really are not solutions walls. Wherever you go, if you go to Belfast, if you looked at the Berlin Wall, if you looked at the wall being built, or Trump's wall as it's like to be called, I'm not sure if it's being built or whatever we're going to call that. They say a problem is unsolvable. That means there can't be dialogue. There can't be any way forward. So we build a wall and we divide it. And what that becomes is self-fulfilling, because it prevents all those mechanisms from moving forward, which could potentially have resolved some of the issues. To give an example, if you're a young person in Bethlehem, if you're say from Ida Camp, we work very closely with that, and Elias works very closely with Ida Camp. If you're brought up in Ida Camp, you are brought up next to the separation wall, literally. For those of you who've been there, you'll know that you go into Ida Camp, on the left-hand side, the wall kind of does, there's a bend in the wall, and there's a military checkpoint, and there's Rachel's tomb at one end, and then it snakes around and follows the camp. You are literally born in the shadow of the wall. If you're born after 2004, you will never have seen anything but the wall on your horizon there. You pretty haven't met any settlers if you live in Ida Camp. You may have done, but it's unlikely. The only Israelis you will have met will have been soldiers. You literally will not have met any other Israelis. When you yourself are living barely less than 5 miles away from Jerusalem, where the whole issues before the wall of that contact, which often was frictious, at times it was frictious, but often wasn't, just doesn't exist. And so the wall reinforces this issue that this problem is insurmountable. And yet, for virtually all of us, we can remember the first time we saw the wall. We take numerous groups to Palestine and Israel. We don't at the moment, obviously, because we're taking no one anywhere at all. But for many years, we took numerous groups to Israel, Palestine. And the first time people see the wall, it does take people's breath away. There's been so many people we've taken where a couple of people in the group have been skeptical. They've been kind of talked into going, and they can't believe it's how it's being portrayed. And seeing the wall immediately undermines all their expectations about it. Because as you drive up to Bethlehem, in particular, where we'd often go first, it just looks like a prison. You have this huge concrete wall, which looks just like a prison. And the enormity of the shock of it, we've almost started to take for granted. it's become part of the landscape. And we really need to start challenging that. So today we're going to talk about some of those earlier memories, and we're going to talk about some of the impacts of the wall. And I'm going to pass over to Elias now to talk a little bit, first of all, about the earliest parts of that. Later on, he's going to talk a bit about some of the work in our Al-Walaj we've done together, and some of the work about the most recent home rebuilding we've been doing together, both of which are very much in the shadow of the wall and the integrated policies. Before I do that, let me just say very quickly, because it wasn't mentioned earlier, to talk about the wall without talking about the settler roads and bypass roads, and without talking about the settlement blocks, is to massively misunderstand its impact. The three are integrated, as Jeff Harper would say, very much in a matrix of control, and we'll talk more about that a bit later on. But let me go over to Elias now. Elias.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And yeah, Holy Land Trust actually started a project in 2007 called the Home Rebuilding Project, which is rebuilding homes demolished by the Israeli military in Area C for several reasons. One of these reasons is actually constructing the wall in Area C in the Palestinian towns and villages. Many Palestinian homes being destroyed because of the root of the wall. And according to the Israeli law, there is like a buffer zone that Palestinians should leave between the wall and the residential area, which is varied between 200 meters to 500 meters in some places. So no building or construction must take place in this buffer zone. So we started this project in Al-Walaj in 2007 because Al-Walaj was the most affected community in Bethlehem area by the wall. That is almost totally, not almost totally surrounded by the wall, leaving only one entrance and exit for the resident of Al-Walaj to get in and out of the village due to the construction of the wall. And the reason is very simple, just for security reason. Israel say that the security reason for the settlements that is surrounding the Palestinian communities in Bethlehem area. We have around 20 settlements and around 15 outposts, when I say Israeli Jewish settlements. And the wall was mainly built around these settlement in 2002. I remember the first construction of the wall was near Rachel Tomb. And now the length of the wall around Bethlehem or in Bethlehem governorate is around 55 kilometers. Like leaving most of the land, around like 40% of Bethlehem area is behind the wall now. It's in the other side of the wall. So I remember in 2002 when I was in the university that time and the construction of the wall took place, I was like witnessing the bulldozers and when they started uprooting the trees in the valley in front of my house in Beit Sahur. And actually confiscating the land of my grandfather between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and starting like uprooting the trees and building these huge fences and concrete walls. As a child, I remember we used to go there every Sunday for picnic, like in that land, which is now it's a settlement. It's called Har Huma settlement. Between Beit Sahur and Jerusalem. It used to be the only open green area in Bethlehem that we used to go there every Sunday or in the feasts with my parents for barbecue. But unfortunately, after 2002 and building the wall, there is no access at all. And even from the other side, like if you cross the checkpoint and you go to Jerusalem, we cannot access the land because the land now is under the full Israeli military control. No construction, no cultivation of the land is allowed. And even we cannot go and harvest the olive trees in October. So there is a lot of reality that was created on the ground after building the wall, leaving a lot of impacts, like social impacts on the Palestinian families, economical impacts by separation Jerusalem and Bethlehem, which is historically known as one city, environmental impacts, like there's a huge environmental impact issues, like a problem in Bethlehem now with the, like there is no way for people to expand anymore. We are very limited in this one open air prison around the world, and imagine like we are not allowed, we don't know how to manage the solid waste, the water waste in Bethlehem. It's really becoming really a disaster here, environmental disasters in the neighborhood in Bethlehem area, that there is no way to take your solid waste to outside Bethlehem. It's all inside. There is a lot of also, like as I said, like restrictions of movement, land confiscation, agricultural impacts. So there is a lot of impacts on this in the daily life of the Palestinian out of this wall. As an organization, we are trying to raise awareness for the international community by organizing like the tours, geopolitical tours, to come and witness and encounter these realities and see what's happening on the ground. In the same time, we are trying to support and empower the local communities who are living around the wall by rebuilding their homes, providing them with alternative services to remain steadfast and to resist in a non-violent way. This is briefly what I can share, but I can share more stories about that. But I don't know if you want to add something, Chris, on that.
Yeah, no, I'll get you back in just a second or two. So I've got a thunderstorm which has started above my head. So if you hear loud cracks of thunder, don't be massively concerned or anything like that at all. It's nothing worse than a thunderstorm. So as earlier said, the massive impact of the wall on people, on livelihoods, on land, on those who've been looked at. Some of the psychological impact of the wall has been very poorly researched still. We were in about, I think pretty nearly 10 years ago, we brought a group over as we did, and this group were talking to a school. And one of the teachers there, she was being interviewed by this artist who were taken over. And they were looking at some of the artwork by the children, and they said from about the age of 10 or 11, all they paint are walls. All the children will paint the separation walls and conflict, because this becomes their reality. And this poem, which I'm going to read to you now, was written in response to that. All they paint are walls. From 10 years old, all they paint are walls. I would teach them of blue skies, of green meadows, dotted with yellow and red flowers, of the star-filled nights, the shade in olive groves, the terrace contours of our hills, and the bleak desert landscape. But stars are blue and flutter in the wind. Green and red speak of a dream we had and may never know. And the terraced hills and olive groves are glimpsed in a disappearing landscape. But grey can be drawn, daubed in cheap graffiti, with the sun glistening on the tarmac roadway, a concrete matte finish that cannot be glossed over. My first encounter with the wall was with Jeff Halper in 2004. It was in Abu Dis. And I imagine if you've been on an ICAD tour or any of his trips there, you will have seen it. At that stage, the wall was just being built. They were actually constructing when we were there. And there was virtually graffiti free all around there, which was kind of, still has a novelty factor in lots of respects. And I distinctly remember Jeff's first description of in 2002 was a separata, as the separation or apartheid wall. And it's really, really important with the wall, while so much stuff focused on land grab and on security, actually, it's always been about apartheid. It's always been about separation. That yes, the economic impact has been vast and is a land grab. But actually, it's basically about separating two communities, one with rights and one without rights. In exactly the same way that the infrastructure and settler roads do the same. If you have the right number plate, you can drive on this road. If you don't, you can't. If you're a settler, you can live, if you have Jewish ID and you're an Israeli, you can live in a settlement. If you're Palestinian, you will not get those resources. It is a direct separation of peoples. And it's part of a system of apartheid, of about separation. It always has been. And as we now look at using the word apartheid far more freely in what our campaigning, and it's become more and more acceptable without people flagging it up as being a huge controversial issue, it's really remembering that the roots of it, the whole roots of the wall come from that, from this absolute desire to separate and to define rights and to define who has access. And with that, what it has become is a border. It has now become the border between, in effect, Israel and the Bantustans on the West Bank. And those are segregated out and separated out, but it is the border. I remember a couple of years ago cycling through the checkpoint, and we were kind of trying to push our way through, and these soldiers running over and say, don't you know this is an international border? And wearing our bright pink lycra, I don't think we really felt entirely in a position to have a full-scale row with him about the international boundary issues, but it's completely seen as a border. And as it becomes seen as a border, so the concepts of a wall become more acceptable. It becomes more acceptable to have a wall here, even though 85% of it is built on Palestinian land. Even as Elias has said, the land confiscation is absolutely huge. So there's been massive impacts on that. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. It really is getting really loud. I may pass back to Elias in a second, as it's just gone suddenly absolutely wild in Cambridge, the weather. The massive impact on there, the massive impact on the psychology of people. Elias, I'm going to pass back to you because I'm having to shout above this storm for a second or two. Elias, if you could carry on giving a bit of an update on the impact of the wall and talking about the home rebuild, the latest home rebuild, and a bit more about our Wallager and other situations, that would be great. I'm sure this will pass in a minute or two.
Sure. Yeah, so as I said before, like Al-Walaj is a special case that is directly affected by the war and many home demolition orders. So we helped, we implemented 5 projects that we rebuilt 5 homes in Al-Walaj in the last 10 years. The last project that we started with Amos, that usually when we do the home rebuilding, Amos bring a group of around 50 to 40 to 50 volunteers that they come and join the home rebuilding, and we do the building on the site as a kind of resisting, like non-violence resisting, that we resist to exist, we exist to resist, and we are giving alternatives to the violence. I mean, to the local families by rebuilding their homes with an international solidarity. So the last project took place last December, like in the Christmas day. We started our project rebuilding a home for Ali Salim Musa and Al Khadr. This house was demolished 3 times just because the location of the house and the hilltop that can oversee the settlers bypass road that was constructed linking Jerusalem and Bethlehem settlements together. So they confiscated a huge land from Al Khadr village to build a bypass road for the settlers, and they built a wall around that bypass. So for security reason, they are not allowing any Palestinian to build in the hilltop around these bypass roads. So they demolished the house for 3 times. The last demolition was 2016. And the family actually gave up, and they said, like, we are not going to rebuild it again until we and Amos came with this initiative and approached the family, and we told them that we're going to rebuild your house for the 4th time. We started last December. Unfortunately, in the middle of the construction, we got a home demolition order because on the other side of the hilltop, there is a small Jewish outpost, and the settlers there, they keep taking pictures and looking at the Palestinian community on the other side and sending reports to the Israeli military. So the Israeli military showed up and they said, you are building a new house here, which is illegal. You need to get permit, which is impossible to get permits from the Israeli military anyway. So we got a home demolition order, number 1797. The order 1797 gives the family 96 hours to demolish the house. Luckily, with the international friends, with Amos Trust and other international activists, we did an international campaign. We've been sending letters to the British prime ministers, parliament member, to American Congress member, Israeli consulate in Washington, and we succeeded at least to freeze, and with the help of a local human rights lawyer from St. Eve, we succeeded for the first time to freeze a home demolition order. And we continued the project to rebuild the house last June, like the 15th of June. We've been working day and night to finish the work in a very short time. The family just moved last Saturday, like a few days ago. They moved to the house, to the new house, and they are living in it now. They're celebrating the Eid, the holiday today in the new house. And we are continuing this lobbying and advocacy on the home demolition policy with our lawyer and with the international friends to stop any future home demolition order for this family. So we need you to keep updated, like to stay updated through Amos newsletter and our newsletter, that if you can keep, like join our campaign to stop the home demolition policy, or like to freeze at least. So this is actually a great success for us, that I'm really proud of that. Like for the first time, we succeeded to stop a military order to freeze the demolition and to move the family in to the new house. Yes, Chris.
Great, thanks. So I just needed permission to be unmuted. Yeah, so, and also some of you will know Hearn, they've been involved in this project as well with us. So 3 organizations working together on there. For all of us, the next stage is quite delicate as well, because it's watching and seeing if the Israeli soldiers are going to come back. We take that as one example of these practical steps of solidarity and challenging the narrative, which is about the wall. This is a normative thing, that this becomes normal, and at the impact of it, and making sure that these things are realized. So much I've mentioned of the wall has become largely invisible, and it's time to start making it visible again as we come up to the commemorations in 2002 of its building and 2004 of the ICC court ruling about the wall and all its affiliated structures being illegal. And we really do need to start making noise and directing campaigns towards this. Because unless we take this opportunity and work with other people to take this opportunity, we're going to let another really important date pass us by without fully focusing on this structure, which has so massively impacted Palestinian life and is a key aspect of the control placed on Palestinians and the massive impact of their freedoms. Furthermore, it also reinforces the Palestinian Authority's control over these areas as well. So it further impacts upon the democratic policies within Palestine as well. If you go to Bethlehem and you see a protest, it's happening at the wall and it's policed by Palestinian Authority until eventually the soldiers come out. So there's multiple reasons for stepping into this space. In order to do that, and I think the storm's just debating here, which is great. I won't have to shout quite as loud as I have been. In order to do that, the key things are to start off by commissioning research and starting to work with researchers on it. To find research about the impact of the wall, not just the statistics, but the impact on young people, the impact on people living there, the impact on the economy, the impact upon moves towards reconciliation, the impact on reinforcing narratives, that we actually start to have clear messages on that. The second thing is to get people involved in it. And we started our campaign on this back in March this year. Every year for the since the first Bethlehem Marathon, which I think was 2013, something like that, we've taken groups over to run the Bethlehem Marathon. If you're a runner or if you're not a runner, particularly if you're not a runner, come and run the Bethlehem Marathon. It's the best day out you could ever imagine. And if you're really not a runner, it's a great sponsorship opportunity as well. You can raise money really easily by running the Bethlehem Marathon. Or as we're going to do next year, if you really are not going to go to Palestine for that, which is fair enough, join in Run the Wall. I'm going to show a clip from Run the Wall now, a brief video, and then I'm going to talk about it and talk a little bit more about this now. If we could have the clip, Ryan. Thank you. So actually, we ended up running about 4 or 5 times the length of the wall and raised 3 or 4 times the amount of money as well. Because we had runners from all around the world taking part. We had loads of Palestinians from Holy Land Trust, from HERN, but particularly from Right to Movement, different groups from there, different groups from around the world taking part. And it's part of this drive to start to raise awareness about the wall. And then with that, there must come campaign actions and really clear campaign actions which we can take. And that's what we need to work with others to start to identify those and the build up to 2002, which we can then take forward to 2004. I'm going to stop there and pass back to Carla.
Thank you. Before we get into the question and answer, we are going into the action for the day. And today's action is a little bit different. Someone highlighted in the chat already that the Tent of Nations is in a particular situation. So that is what the action will be today. And Omar is going to tell us a little bit about what the situation is there they are facing and why we want you to take action now.
Thank you, Carla. The Tent of Nations is a farm that is owned by a Palestinian Christian family to the southwest of Bethlehem area. The Tent of Nations has been in continuous battles with the Israeli government that has been trying to confiscate the land of the Nassar family. The Tent of Nations has, although they have paper to prove their ownership of the land, going back to the Ottoman time period, over 100 years ago, yet they have not been able to get the protection from the Israeli government. Since the beginning of COVID-19 and with all of the limitations and restrictions on travel, fewer internationals were able to come to the Tent of Nations, and this has created or increased the attacks on the community of the Nassar family. So currently, the Nassar family is asking people to sign a petition that would ask the US government, the US consulate or the US embassy, the US government to interfere. We've had a very difficult 4 past years with the Trump administration that was not willing or listening to Palestinian voices. Today, we hope with Biden that there is at least maybe a small door open to create some advocacy and to hold Israel accountable for their illegal actions. So kindly, we're asking people, we've had the Tent of Nations at to speak a few weeks ago at a Kumi session, and they've sent out this call yesterday. So please, if you'd like to endorse the petition, if you haven't already, I've seen many of our friends have already signed the petition. We're trying to reach 1,000 signatures by the end of today. If you sign it and you forward it to another 2 or 3 people, we'll bypass the 1,000 mark by the end of today.
Thank you, Omar. We'll give about 5 minutes for people to take action on this right now. During this time, you can also use the chat to discuss with other people. We'll have some music playing, and then we'll come to the question and answer period in a couple of minutes after you've taken this action. All right, thank you for taking action there. I see some people have had some difficulty accessing the links. Make sure you click on the link through the chat and not on the screen, and that should hopefully work for you. So now we move to question and answer with Chris and Elias. Chris, the first question was directed to you. The person asked, do you think the fait accompli and the closing down of consideration of real solutions, is that the whole intention of the Israeli authorities in building the wall?
I don't think it's the whole intention. I think it's very much the intention. Well, sorry, it is the intention, yes. So just to understand the question better. It is to say that the annexation, which has been talked about, is there. It's happened. It's real. Whether Trump says it's going to happen or not and be decreed, it's happened. The wall, the separation, the settlements, the bypass roads have created this. One of the things about cycling around there particularly is if you go as a normal group, you miss most of the separation and most of the walls, so most of the roads, most of the bypass roads. And this massive infrastructure of control, particularly along the whole of the Jordan Valley and other places, it's just missed. And those things have been built in such a way that it means that it has been annexed. That's what's happened. Whether or not it's going to be formally ratified or not is almost irrelevant. And anything which says these areas haven't been, in effect, annexed, large chunks of Area C, if not all of Area C, it's just missing what's actually happening in reality on the ground. And that's why pinpointing these things and responding is so vitally important. And actions such as home rebuilds, which flags that up and says this is wrong, are really important in flagging it up and why it's so important to be standing against home demolitions especially.
Thank you. Another question for you, Chris, about the poem that you shared. Can you please give the name of the author? And where could a person find this poem if they want to read it and share it?
Sure. The poem is by myself, and it's from a book called Words of Hope, which is available for the Amos Trust website. If you look in the shop there, you'll find two books, a book called Words of Hope and the book which we brought out last year called Seeds of Hope, which has Seeds of Hope has got an unbelievable list of authors in it. There are poetry, books of poems, reflections, bits from Palestine, some bits of, I suppose you call them liturgy as well, which we use on our Tuesday Words of Hope as well.
Okay, thank you. Which organizations help with rebuilding? You've spoken a fair bit about home demolitions. So who is all involved in helping bring these houses back?
I'll leap in there and pass on to Elias. So we've worked with Holy Land Trust and with HERN, which is Hebron International Relief Network, I think is what it stands for. I always get confused with what HERN stands for. And we've worked with Holy Land Trust for many years on this program, and other people work with Holy Land Trust on it. ICAD also run those from the Israeli side. And then a number of INGOs will, international NGOs, will either provide temporary accommodation or tents or other construction for it. Elias, do you want to add anything to that at all?
Yeah, actually, the ICAD, the Israeli Committee Against Home Demolition, started this project in Jerusalem area, in East Jerusalem, home rebuilding, and we started this project 2007 in full partnership with ICAD. That we did. This is the first time in Bethlehem and the West Bank, and then we moved on this project as Holy Land Trust, and ICAD is focusing on East Jerusalem. And now we are doing it in full partnership with Amos Trust. Like they are helping us raising, the fund and raising awareness on this project and recruiting participants to come. And we are doing the on-ground implementation, like recruiting the families and doing all the construction and all the legal stuff. I don't know any other organization that they are doing this so far, but now we are doing it with full partnership with HERN and Amos Trust.
Okay, and what is the date for the anniversary of when the wall was built or when it was started?
Yeah, it started in June 2002. The international court ruling was July 2004. It's still not finished. I think it's about 200 kilometers more to go, something like that of it. So it's far from finished, which kind of makes a mockery of all the security issues. If you don't finish a wall, how can you say it's purely for security? Yeah.
The Run the Wall video that you showed, is that available in French?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think with Google Translate or YouTube Translate, it is. I don't think it is at this moment in time. We had a number of French runners, and we would love to have more French runners next time. We also had lots of people walking, I should say. We call it Run the Wall. If you walk the wall, that was absolutely fine as well. We're not going to tell you what sort of transport you used. Well, you can't drive it. That would be, unless you're in a sort of scooter, which case is fine. But basically, it was getting involved. Get involved, raise awareness about the wall. That's the key thing of this. Raise awareness about it. We need to build bridges, not walls. That's the key thing about it. Yeah. So kind of no, but it can be. Yeah.
And someone asked, why not send copies of the home demolition orders to the press in the US and the UK? The New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, Times, Telegraph. Why not give them the text describing these facts and see what they do with it?
Ellis, do you want to answer that at all?
Yeah, actually, we have been sharing like these stories, but for not security reason, because actually we don't want to publicize that on media, because we want to give more space and privacy for the lawyers and the human rights to work within the Israeli court. That's why I think we don't publish anything related to the home demolition orders. But there's many orders that's been published, and you can find it on the news, like in Google. But yeah, we prefer not to share any of these documents, because these like an official papers that is like the lawyer are dealing with it within in the Israeli military court.
In the UK this year, there has been more coverage of demolitions than there has been previously, which has been, and some of it has been very good, particularly in the South Hebron Hills and especially up in the Jordan Valley. A lot of papers traditionally will not publish stories about it. They either say it's old news, very traditionally, or they'll just or they're looking for balance, is one of the other classic things. This year, partially because of the situation in Gaza, but there has been more reporting on a number of these issues than there has been previously, which has been a good thing in that respect. Although you could argue the lack of people visiting has meant that that's even more important than it ever has been before.
Thank you. Well, we're coming right up on the hour now. So I think there's a few questions, I'm afraid, that didn't get answered. Some of them may be relevant next week, so I encourage you to come back and ask again next time. Thank you to everyone who joined today. A video link to this gathering will be shared sometime today, or will be shared in the future, close to now, on the Kumi Now website and on YouTube, and it will also be shared in the next newsletter. You can subscribe to Kumi Now on YouTube. You can subscribe to the newsletter to make sure you receive all of this. Please, we would appreciate if you would share this session with your friends and colleagues. Also, the Tent of Nations petition, make sure you share that along. Next week, the focus will be on the rights of Palestinian family to unification and the Israeli efforts to keep Palestinian families apart. If you would like to be reminded of these online gatherings an hour before they begin, you can register for email reminders on the website kuminow.com/online using the form at the bottom of the page. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Chris and Elias, for sharing. And hopefully we'll see you back here next week. Have a good day, good night. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.